Here we go now. Here we go, here we go, here we go now, here we go, here we go, here we go.
Let us proceed forward.
Every week on Sonic Weekly, there's a new theme song, and it all kind of coalesces into the flute loop. It's a loop of flute that goes in a little circle.
How long does it go for?
And it's very pleasing. Oh, it goes for about an hour.
Wow.
Are you playing the hour version? You're not playing an MP3 that you downloaded off the internet?
No, I sure am not. That is the theme song from our show, Sonic Weekly. Welcome back to Sonic Weekly. Welcome back to the show. I'm Grant. With me is David the Lurker. Hi, David.
Oh, hi. That's right. I'm still here.
And where is Bo?
Where is Bo?
Bo. We don't know where Bo is. Bo hasn't sent. We have heard rumors that a new family member has joined the Bo clan, and we're very thrilled for Bo.
Would it be a Bobby?
A Bobby is accurate. And returning to the show is not Bo, but wife of the show, wife of the podcast, Ashlyn ANSTEE. Ashlyn ANSTEE.
Hello. I already chimed in because I'm a baby interrupting.
Thanks for returning to the show. You previously were on to advocate for your love of your very favorite video game in the history of all video games, which is Sonic 06. That was the first episode of this show.
Yeah.
And I can see you have a Shadow the Hedgehog hanging in the background.
Yeah, Shadow the Hedgehog is my first husband.
Yeah.
Now.
Right. And I'm second.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Good riff. Perfect. No notes at all. So Ed Skudder is with us. Our friend,
Hey.
Ed Skudder. Hi, Ed.
Howdy. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming by. Ed, as you may know, and some of our listeners have been very excited for your guest appearance on this show because they, along with us, are big fans of the Super Mario Brothers movie, which you were head of story on and has made all of the money and has made all of the smiles in all of the land. Ashlyn and I saw it on a harrowing adventure to go see it on opening day, but but even in spite of that, we had a great time, didn't we?
We couldn't miss it.
And then you and I saw it together.
That's right.
Ed, with Chad Quant, who was also on the show, and a group of friends. And what a lovely experience that was, seeing with you and the friends and seeing your name on the screen. And the movie was also amazing. And then people are like, hey, you worked on the movie? This guy worked on the movie. And you're like, hey, I did. Hello. Hey, how you doing? I'm Ed. Good to see you. And then shortly after that, I cornered you and was like, listen, I got a podcast. It's normally about Sonic, but sometimes we talk about Mario, man, because we're really excited about Mario.
It's all true. It all happened, and here we are. That was actually my favorite viewing experience of the movie. I've seen it 8,000 times, but that one we all saw it together is my favorite one.
Does your love grow for the movie each time you see it, or is it just more painful each time?
It was a roller coaster the first 8,000 times. Sometimes it'd be great, sometimes it'd be terrible, sometimes they're very embarrassing, other times I was very proud. I remember seeing it at the premiere, and I think when we went to the premiere, everyone was very tired. I was very tired, and I think I was out of it. I wasn't feeling it. But then seeing it kind of like in the wild with like the audience, the Gen Pop, if you will, and just hear like kids in the audience too. They were like losing their minds and laughing. I was like, oh, okay, it's a decent movie. I'm kidding. I fucking love it. It's so. I only had a small hand in what 800 people worked together on, so I don't feel bad saying it's fucking sweet. But I love it. I just my Blu-ray arrived in the mail yesterday. I can't wait. I bought a poster. I've got it all. I've got all the swag for the project that I was working on.
You have to buy your own Blu-ray?
Look.
Yeah,
bottom line,
perks are there. Yeah.
I didn't ask for one in Universal's defense.
I hope they gave you something.
I would like a gold coin, please. A real gold Mario coin that weighs 28 pounds. No, but it's exciting.
Yeah.
That was a good viewing.
Maybe you could tell us, what is a head of story? What does that mean? That it means you're the head of storyboards, right? It means you are in charge of, it's hundreds of people, or I don't know if that's right, but it's many, many people working on this project, right? It is a large
Yeah.
machine. And Ashlyn is here so that we can also ask you some intelligent questions about storyboard directing, because that's what Ashlyn does. And David and I are very excited, from the game view, and also I just kind of want to hang out and get you guys to talk to each other after I talk. So yeah, so where did your involvement begin with the Mario Brothers movie as head of story? You had previously worked on projects like Unikitty as showrunner,
Mm-hmm.
created things independently. You and Ashlyn also go back, and Ashlyn described you once as brilliant. I think brilliant is a fair, objective term too. Of sometimes you just know people in your life living in LA, working in creative industries, or being adjacent to that. In my case, and it's yeah, you just know people who are brilliant. They are exceptional at what they do, and that was true observing you for a long time. And then Mario, very big project with a lot of different people. How did it begin? Mario, were you there from the very beginning, or did you come in later through Illumination? That has the shape of a question and a rant.
I like it. Great question. Also, thank you. Make me blush over here. I started in August of 19, and work had already been done on the movie before that to a certain degree. There was a bunch of scenes already done. There's storyboard artists and crew members, and the whole thing was up and running. We weren't fully staffed at that point. But I actually just started as a freelance board artist. I was just doing scenes here and there. And then eventually, early 2020s, when I made the step up to head of story. We kind of had the whole team assembled, and then we were kind of up to full power, if you will. And I just continued as head of story ever since then. Our little storyboard team, we were up to like 8 or 9. I think we got as big as 10 once in a while, especially towards the end of the movie when things were fast and furious. But head of story as a job, common misconception, I think, among people outside of the industry, and you can't blame them. They think you're in charge of the whole story. But not true. Like you said, it's just the storyboard department. So while I have a certain involvement in the telling of the story, I'm not the one kind of creating the story from scratch. We have writers and executives, and the directors have a hand in that. And obviously Chris Meledandri is our kind of main guiding force at the studio. So there's obviously a stocked kitchen of creative people, many chefs all working together. But what me and my team do is we'll get a script, we'll get pages that need to be brought to life, and our directors will work with me and the board artist, whoever's doing the scene. And our job is to pretty much take a page of script and turn it into something you can look at. So our storyboard team, this is maybe for the layman. A lot of people in LA know the drill, but anyone listening outside of LA, it's the storyboards are the blueprint of what you're actually going to watch on screen. You're kind of sketching out in very loose terms what's going to happen, where the camera's looking, what are the characters doing, what's the action, what's the acting, all of it. We have to cook it all up. So I'm in charge of the team who does the visual cooking, and I do a lot of the cooking myself as well. I was happy to do a lot of the storyboards on the film as well, which is very fun. Sometimes you don't have time to do it, but I was glad I did.
Yeah, one of the things you told me was the amount of boards you did. You were like, "Oh, I looked through my files." How many files was it that you had created of storyboards?
Oh my Lord, it was I think I have 30 or 40,000 in the movie.
Panels. Imagine 30 or 40,000 tiny Marios running around the computer is what I always picture with that. But that's a lot. A lot of head of stories, I think it can sometimes be a more managerial role. So that was something that was very interesting to me, is how deeply you were involved with actually doing it as well.
Yeah, I tried to be really hands-on and make sure I had enough time to bring some of these things to life, partly because the movie is so exciting to work on, and it's just such a cool, playground to play, and I wanted to do it. But also Mario's kind of it's an unusual world to pull off kind of in a visual way. So to help some of these crazier action scenes or just stranger ideas come to life on screen in a way that would be understandable to sort of any audience member, it sometimes took a little extra finesse. So it was I got a lot of the scenes that were either really complicated or hard to do, or really complicated to understand.
Well, it's certainly one of the things that strikes you as a viewer is there's a kinetic energy throughout, and that's maybe because of there's a lot of long one take shots that are very mesmerizing and astonishing. And what comes to mind are, just off the top of it, it's the Rainbow Road sequence, the initial running, some of the 2D sections. I mean, there's a couple of really huge set pieces that are kind of seemingly built around the one shot flowing sort of direction. And is that part of head of story and your team?
Yeah, so it's funny, like the Rainbow Road one is a great example of sort of how the collaboration of this whole thing works and how ideas can kind of get ping-ponged back and forth. So the original version of Rainbow Road that I storyboarded with help my team help kind of clean it up, but I was kind of planning the whole thing out. And I originally had a completely different long take with completely different things happening. And a lot of the action in that long take ended up getting cut from the scene. I originally storyboarded it was like a 5-minute chase scene. Way too much car chasing. So we ended up cutting it down. It was like 2.5 minutes in the movie. And what we ended up doing was a lot of the ideas from other parts of the chase got stuck together, and they liked the long take. The directors were really into it, but we just ended up doing it with different parts of the chase that we then kind of found our way from shot to shot. Other things like the Brooklyn long chase, where it's sort of that long shot of them like doing the side-scrolling running, that actually was just planned out as one long continuous side-scrolling oneer from start to scratch. Actually, the storyboards to the final picture are like pretty much identical. So it's there's like a whole range. But I think I was also telling the crew in general, I love long takes. I grew up on Spielberg, and I always love a good oneer. It's always very impressive when someone can pull it off to me. So I told the crew, like, as often as we can, like, if you don't have to cut, don't cut, because I'd rather keep the camera in motion and keep the audience in the action with the characters. I think it's also partly to do with how Mario as a character is sort of like in the zeitgeist and in people's mind, which is as a game. And obviously there's no cuts in a game. So it's sort of like this feeling of like trying to replicate gameplay through the visual medium of cinema. And we do that by not cutting.
I think it works exceptionally well. The first Super Mario Brothers game is all about the side scroll. It's the unique feature. It's scroll. It does not cut. It's not one board cut, new board. It is simultaneous. So it did feel like it was rhyming with the source material.
Yeah, I'm glad that came off.
I do think it's cool hearing your perspective, because I know that you are not a gamer. I'm outing you as a non-gamer on this podcast.
Yeah.
Obviously, you watch your partner play games, and I assume you played games as a kid, but how do you feel like you absorb video games as a artistic person?
Very casually. I have no patience for video games. I have no interest in sitting down and playing them for hours. I love the medium, and I love watching video games, and especially modern games. I think are just some of the most amazing storytelling and some of the most breathtaking visuals I've ever seen across any medium. I love the format. I just don't have the patience for it. However, maybe it's fate or destiny or whatever you call it, but the only games I ever actually played seriously in my life were Mario games. It's the best ones.
They are the best ones. I mean,
yeah, Mario 3 was one of my favorite games of all time. Probably still is. Getting Yoshi at the beginning of that game is it's deep in my core memories. But I think every time I tell someone I don't play video games, I always caveat it with I never play video games except Mario Kart, which is true.
You gotta have a tourney.
And I mean, I'm just going to, sort of assume that you have no ill will toward video games. You're not saying video games
no way.
Can go
They're
kick
fantastic.
rocks. I don't think you're saying that.
I think he is. I think what you're saying is that video games are a waste of time once you reach the age of 7.
Nailed it.
And they're a waste of time before you're the age of 6. So you got one good year.
Well, the real question is, did you see the original Mario movie?
So that's a great question. I actually hadn't seen it for the longest time. It's definitely nothing I grew up with. I actually eventually watched it with Chad Quant at his house, but this was sort of like near the end of production, and I very specifically told myself, "All right, I'm working on the Mario movie. I haven't seen the old one. I cannot, under any circumstance, watch this movie while production's like happening in earnest." I was like, I can't let it infect my mind with whatever it's going to infect my mind with. So I like kept away from it just so there's no overlap. And then, we're at the end of Act 3 and everything's winding down. I finally watched it with Chad and realized there was zero overlapping.
You probably weren't gonna. Yeah, you probably weren't gonna get inspired by it.
All right. I know. I think it would have been funny if halfway through the one you made, Mario just becomes Bob Hoskins.
Mario in the multiverse, because every franchise has to do multiverse. So
Yeah,
That's right.
dude, that movie's the craziest goddamn thing in the world.
Yeah. Was it
Right.
mentioned in production at all? Like, was anybody on a Zoom call like the Mario movie, and then they were like kicked out of the room, like the original one? Kicked out of the Zoom room?
I think it usually came up in terms of we were always talking about the box office performance, and we're like, well, at least the bar's real low.
yeah, like you said, like, and Chad pointed it out as well. I would imagine that like there are some interesting similarities to the two movies, just in terms of like the overall, sort of like they go into, just because it's the Mario story. Like they go into the pipe, they find a new land.
There are, on the surface, similarities. You start in Brooklyn, you end up in the Mushroom Kingdom. Right, since you came in a little bit after, I mean, I'm sure it came up at some point anyway, because I found it interesting, that Nintendo seems super into, hey, start in Brooklyn, start in New York, because there is this sense, like for people who have played the games in the intervening years, that Nintendo kind of wanted to steer away from the idea that Mario was from the real world. And then when they did introduce the New York analog, once again in Mario Odyssey, it was called New Donk City. Like, oh, it looks like New York City, but it's not. So it seemed like, oh, the Mushroom Kingdom wasn't just you got sucked in a pipe by mistake and went to some magical place. It was just, off the turnpike somewhere. So I guess it was like, do you know if it was something that they wanted? Like the original crew said, hey, we want to put New York in there, and they had to push with Nintendo? Or was Nintendo like, oh yeah, that's the origin? Of course, it's always been the origin. Why wouldn't it be?
That's a really good question. I think I missed the original like genesis of the film as before my time. I could say two things to speak to that are sort of like indirect observations. One of them is Chris Meledandri, and I think what he does really successfully when he's kind of like helping to guide a project overall is that he always tries to relate it to sort of like we always call him Joe Arizona, but like your average audience member across the world. Like, what does, or like for me, it'd be like, what does my dad think about Mario, right? So there's always got to be some sort of like relatable in for the audience, and I think having Mario and his brother, they're sort of like down and out, business guys from New York. They're trying to get their dreams off the ground. And I'm like, yeah, that's like a relatable thing. Everyone's like knows someone like that or has like had that feeling. And then they go off on the adventure, but it kind of gives you a bit of a grounded entry point into the story. And I think because of that, it makes it so much more relatable to like the average audience member who's never heard of Mario, doesn't know what these two guys running around are up to. And then the other thing I was going to say is also Nintendo. Like they're an awesome collaborator, and I think they really helped push the movie to look the way it did and like just be exactly Mario on screen. But they were also really accommodating for whatever story stuff we wanted to cook up. They obviously have to input and like they'll give notes, and they're still our creative partner in this whole thing. But they really let us kind of swing for the fences in terms of what the narrative was and what the characters were doing, and even kind of like how the characters acted. It seemed like, from what I could judge, it seemed like Nintendo was really excited just to have, a billion-dollar version of their property being brought to the screen. So it was cool to have enough leeway to try these things out, and they were very accepting of it all.
I'm interested in hearing you speak more about the directors and just the goals for the movie. Like you mentioned, that's obviously a big one of Joe Arizona being a focus of, somebody that's not necessarily invested as like from the games or from any previous thing. Does this movie work well on its own. At the same time, the movie's references are on such a different level of references that I feel like calling them references or Easter eggs or whatever is sort of a disservice, because they're layered in there with what seems to be such care. And I mentioned to you at our screening that one of the things that jumped out to me was like the sparks turn purple in in Mario Kart when he's like, when he's drifting and he's about to boost. Little things that made me happy in terms of, I guess, those references. So those are two different goals that may have been there, but I don't know if that's true. And was there anything else that comes to mind in terms of a...
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, the example you brought up is a great example too. So the sparks on the car were actually, that was a Nintendo request. They said, we really want to see that like hyper drift thing on when you skid and power boost off of something. So that was something they requested specifically. And I think that was also part of what made the partnership so cool, was that they were hands off, but they're very hands on in other ways, in that they would give us just so much to work with. And they would often send characters or examples from the game, just all these little things that we could put in the movie that were like authentic to their vision for the Mario verse, or whatever universe these characters live in. They wanted to make sure that we had like everything available in case we didn't know something. On the other hand, everyone working on this movie has been a fan of Mario for like 40 years. So kind of like every single person had like just something about one of the games they loved, or a moment that they were really trying to get in there. The directors are like huge Mario fans too. So they would always have like really specific things that they were looking to put in. So I think the whole crew kind of like inadvertently just like crammed every Nintendo thing they could possibly think to cram into a movie all in at the same time. And we just kind of like had it all. And there's even things like watching the film that I had no idea about. Like I caught it after the fact, or someone told me, and I was like, oh shit, I didn't realize it was the GameCube like sound or whatever for the ringtone. There's so many little layers and background elements, like the French team working on it in Paris was like layering stuff in. So you're right. It was very much a labor of love. I think everyone working on it was genuinely in love with Mario, wanted to do it justice, and wanted the audience to feel how excited they were to work on it. They wanted to like match that excitement in the audience's viewing experience. So it's there's a lot of passion poured into this film. It's such a seemingly goofy franchise. So there was like 800 people who were really stoked to make it.
Yeah, you feel it. You feel the scale of it, and you feel the scale of the love in there. And
Yeah.
I think that's I think that comes through.
I think we also acknowledge that you made this. I mean, you've been working on this film since 2019, but the majority of the movie was like boarded over pandemic, like all work from home, all in that like brand new atmosphere. Is that a good word for the pandemic? An atmosphere that was created. How did you find working with over the pandemic on this movie?
Easily biggest pandemic I've lived through. So we do it all big at Illumination. No, well, it's funny. Illumination, I think, was positioned very uniquely compared to the other studios in that a lot of our work was done remotely anyway. Like we had board artists all over the country, all over the world. We had guys in Spain and London and Florida. So the whole thing was sort of like done over email and Zoom, like before the pandemic hit. So when everyone was like I was already working from home since August of 19. So when everything shut down, I was like, oh, I guess I'll still stay here and like continue emailing everyone. So I think there's a adjustment period when we're trying to figure out how the hell to stay alive day to day in this weird new system that we had to live in. But I think work was the easiest part of the whole thing. That was all figured out.
That's awesome. I was wondering because I know Illumination is in the west side of LA, Santa Monica area. If you're a listener who's not in LA, that's like an hour commute easy compared to like Burbank. Yeah. So I'm glad that you didn't have to go into work. You know what we love talking about Sonic Weekly is traffic, LA traffic.
You do 10 or do 405 to the 101 and all up and over.
Well, you might have to take the 10, this is what I mean. Ed's brilliant. Ed knows. I mean, that is the way. That's the proper way if you're going to do it.
Right. I guess that's when you really want one of those Mario Kart cards.
Motor City, baby.
the LA freeway. I don't know. I'm from Detroit, so we just sort of
The Motor City.
Yeah, that's where all the cars came from. Well, until they weren't.
I was going to tell the story of how Ed and I met, because when Ed and I met, you were working on, I think, one of your first films. So I had met Ed.
That sounds right. We're very old.
I was interning at the company that Ed was working at, 6 Point Harness, which, went on to do some great stuff with you. But at the time, you had boarded an entire feature, I think, completely on your own, and was doing the entire thing, getting it off the ground, very like action. I remember that film was very action heavy, very chases and and it's interesting to see you then take that and I mean, you've grown so exponentially since then as a story. I mean, you were great back then. I say that you've grown exponentially as a storyteller, but you really have. So it's just cool to see you kind of like come into your own on a film with this, big budget, and then with an equally big audience response.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Like I cut so much of my teeth on that movie, and there's so many things I was just kind of trying out for the first time in that like little indie movie back in the day. And then there's definitely moments on Mario where I was like, oh yeah, I sort of like did this scene already. But now I can do a better version of it. It was a good way to get all the mistakes out of the way. And I completely agree with you. It's been an exponential growth since then. I will watch that movie once in a while just to keep myself humble, because there's some rough stuff in there.
I remember at the time being like very awed by it. I mean, because it was pretty impressive that you had made so much of it. Like, it was just you and another writer, I believe, just like in a room. And it was like you came out and you were like, we made a film. It was like, what? When are you? What?
Well, it's funny. We had actually, there's a little bit of storyboard help on it. I did most of it, which I will never do again. That was terrible. But we had a couple artists helping out on a few scenes here and there. And one of the artists who was doing some storyboards for the film was one of the directors, Aaron Horvath. Because I met him at 6 Point Harness a few years before I met you. And he was an animator there, and I was too. And he was a really good artist. So I was like, hey, man, we need some storyboard help. Do you mind like doing a couple scenes? And he did. And they're fantastic. Like, my favorite parts of the movie were some of his scenes. We kind of like stayed in touch vaguely through the years until WB kicked off, and I was doing Unikitty under his supervision over there. And then when he went to Mario, I went to Mario with him. But it's been a long road that started with that goddamn movie.
Wow, I hadn't realized that at all. That's what a small city, truly.
You guys are killing it too. I'm very excited.
Gotta say also, great question, great answer. Answers wise, you've been killing it. Questions wise, we'll figure it out.
Well, if you want, you can give an answer to something, and we'll make up a question in post. So.
I just want to ask dumb questions. Like, I'm the host that's like, well, who's your favorite Mario character? And why is it Peach?
That is a good question. It is Peach! She's the best part of the film. I love monkeys more than anything. Monkeys make me very happy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Donkey Kong's fantastic, but Peach is better.
I'm waiting for the Donkey Kong spin-off where there's no plans. I can start the rumor now, though.
Yeah, start the industry gossip going.
Donkey Kong Babies is what
oh my god, $2 billion.
Donkey Kong Baby.
You can make the movie version of the Donkey Kong Country show, from the 90s, the CG, which has a lot of songs. It's a song in every episode.
I've seen clips of it, and I think it's a masterpiece, and I don't think we should change the models or the animation at all. Leave it as is. And for everyone who hasn't seen it, go do some YouTubing, follow down the rabbit hole. It's great. Yeah.
Most of it's probably on YouTube, if not all of it. I feel like it's not one of those things that gets...
not in the Criterion collection, for sure.
Which is a mistake.
Agreed.
Yeah. Oh,
Grant, should we pull some of these questions we had?
Oh, sure. I thought David was in the middle of a thought. Otherwise, I have some other questions off in my mind that I would like to know.
I've just been thinking about the phrase. Right, I've been thinking about the phrase Joe Arizona, because to me it sounds like a movie that came out in like 95.
Yeah, it's like a Coen Brothers movie or something. Raising Arizona?
I went Joe Dirt, you went Raising Arizona. That shows something. Joe Arizona.
Right.
I gotta say,
Joe
the
Arizona.
Mario movie was special for me as a big Mario fan, and also as a Jack Black fan. This felt like a very right place for the Jables of it all. Like Jim Carrey being Dr. Robotnik in the Sonic movies, cool, great, love it. But Jack Black is just on a different level. And the Peaches song was unexpected. Didn't know that was coming. That was very cool and fun and exciting. And you mentioned that you guys are working on Unikitty, and Ashlyn, I think, was alluding to that. This other film, but your earlier film, but you're a comedy person. You're very funny. And Jack Black is very funny. The whole cast is very funny. The whole movie is very funny. It's an action movie. It's a lore movie. It's an IP movie. It's a big movie, but it's funny. There's lots of gags and silliness and stupidity. Very, very stupid stuff. Were there particularly stupid things that were too stupid to maybe go in? Or another way to possibly take this question is, Jack Black's cool. Were you able to interact with the cast at all? Do those worlds intersect at all, or are they so separate that
Yeah, well, sadly for me, the story team and the cast do not talk. We are very separate from their whole process. It's probably for the best. We'd be very annoying. Jack Black was a freaking superstar. I cannot believe how popular that song is. It's a very good song, though. So maybe I actually can believe it. But 83 on the top 100, incredible. I love it. I keep getting videos sent to me from friends and family who are like telling me their kids are singing it, their class is singing it. I'm getting videos of like just audiences around the world. Like I saw a video of it at a reggaeton club being remixed on the dance floor. Incredible. It's everywhere. It's the phenomenon of the film. Song of the summer, baby. But I think there's also a bit of surprise for me. Like I knew it was a good song and a really awesome sequence, but I didn't expect it to connect the way it did with the audience. So I was very caught off guard, pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, it's an earworm for sure, and it's simple in a way that's perfect. It's simple in the way that a Beatles song is simple. It's easy to remember and easy to get stuck in your head. It's very melodic and silly and goofy as well.
It feels like a perfect blend of a Teen Titans Go song and Jack Black. Put them together. Peaches.
Exactly
perfect.
What it is.
There was a lot of it's funny you asked about the stupid funny stuff too, because we actually had kind of a range of comedy and a range of stuff we were trying to do in the movie, and eventually we found the tone. It took a little while to figure out what worked and what didn't, but what we found out was that it's actually not. We didn't design it to be a very funny movie. We obviously knew it needs comedy in it, but the directors had always agreed that the action comes first. It needs to primarily be an adventure film with comedic moments in it. So the comp they would always give us was Indiana Jones is a perfect example of a movie that's mostly about action and adventure, but there's funny stuff that happens in it, so it feels entertaining and lighthearted the whole time. So that was sort of our North Star as we were figuring out how funny everyone should be. And Mario and Luigi and Peach especially, those three are sort of our main protagonists with agency, and Mario and Luigi, especially the brothers, are superheroes in this world. They are the equivalent of our Marvel heroes. So we tried to make sure that they never looked too goofy or incompetent or silly. It was fine for them to be hit in the face or eat shit, but we never wanted them to be slapstick Marx Brothers, tripping over themselves or whatever. We wanted to make sure they were always cool. We'd treat them would this happen to Harrison Ford? If not, don't do it. Yeah, because it doesn't seem like that on the surface. It's the goobers with big eyeballs, but yeah, we tried to take it very seriously. The whole thing, the comedy of the whole movie was these are really, really cute little characters in really dangerous situations, and they're all taking it very seriously. So for us, it kind of seems very the the contrast is where the comedy comes from.
Absolutely.
I love Mario as Harrison Ford. That's such a great
right
comparison.
Right. I like the have him redub it. I want to hear Harrison Ford read.
Just so cranky.
Right. I mean, he could read the whole thing, actually. I just want to see where that goes.
Yeah.
I hear him as Peach. I think he'd be a good Peach, too.
Everybody, a one-man show. It was Indiana Jones and John McClane were our two Mario comparison.
Well,
Weirdly,
I mean, John, it makes John McClane, tends to always, because you see him get hurt and he gets dirtier and bloodier as it goes on. You see him earn those victories, and it's definitely like a lot of the comedy comes from the clash of context and just the premise of the thing. But what I mean is like there's like the Luma, I guess the Luma who's like convinced that they're doomed and stuff. That's an interesting way to like find and mine comedy and humor from. That doesn't have to be in the movie, and yet it seems like the filmmakers were pretty confident in that joke, and it seemed rightfully so, because the joke killed in both screenings that I attended, and it comes on at the end as well. Like it's great.
I love that little guy.
I guess
that felt like a very Lynn joke to me in like
a
way.
Yeah, it's like cute but like really fucked up.
Yeah.
And that's very Horvath and Jelinek too. The director's sense of humor is like very dark and subversive, which I love. It's like my favorite thing in the world. It's like all the moments that we can make it like really, really bleak and grim for these like adorable little characters. Like it just warms my heart.
Right. The bits that are like, oh, this is a little fucked up. Was there something that was there like a bit that was a little too dark that was in there for a while, and then you were like, maybe this is a little over. Maybe this one thing was just a bit too much. Or
there's definitely a lot of like combat and like action scenes where we would push it pretty far, and they were like, oh, we should dial this back a little bit. The first thing is on the cutting room floor, where it was like the parts that were a little intense.
Yeah. Okay. I guess that makes
smashing
sense.
a Koopa's head with like another Koopa. Is like the bones of the...
Yeah, we pull a full Midsommar hammer scene. Mario kills the Hammer brother.
Right.
It's a sacrifice.
It's a tricky thing. Like you managed to do that very well, of like the video game violence of like nobody. It doesn't feel like anyone gets hurt,
and yet it doesn't feel like there's no stakes either. Like when they're in they're. I guess mostly that moment when they're drowning and getting swallowed by the big fish is when it feels.
That's pretty right. Well, there is also a death. That one Koopa does die.
Yeah.
Comes just on-screen death.
Yeah. I mean, it's fine because he's still alive while he's dead, but he does die. Like it's
and Mario's dad also. I thought that was really interesting. That part where did they cut that for the later screens where Mario's dad dies and they all go to the funeral?
Maximus.
Is that the original?
Yeah. I remember. I thought that was great. Hey, actually, speaking of,
go ahead.
Well, okay. So speaking of the Mario family, that was surprising too, because I mean, it's like I'm sure Mario and Luigi have parents, and uncles and cousins, but here they were, and so did they come from Nintendo? Of like, yeah, Mario's got an uncle. Is this guy, or were you guys like pitching like this is maybe the Mario family? Maybe that's so separate also from head of story. That's character, but maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think they were like pretty solidly in the script by the time I came on, so it was just sort of like part of the environment we had to work with. But I do remember reading that Mario's dad, I think, was actually an unused design from one of the other earlier games. So it was, in a weird way, like a really deep cut Easter egg in its own right. But I think when I learned that, it just tickles me pink that even like the design of Mario's dad comes from somewhere in the Nintendo lore. So we weren't just like making everything up. And it all came back to the games at some point. But then we were I wasn't sure how it was gonna land. That the dinner scene with the family went through just so many iterations and little micro tweaks. We were trying to get it like perfect, and it was one of the last things I think they recorded and finished off was like some of the dialogue between Mario and his dad. We like always were adjusting it to make sure it worked. But that was another thing we were trying to like make sure it's relatable for the audience. That's also sort of the only moment we get like any kind of like insight into Mario's like character and feelings and motivation for the rest of the movie. And we only had like a few lines to do it in. So we had to set up 90 minutes of emotional journeying in 3 lines.
Yeah, those lines become pretty important then when it's like all of those different parameters to work within.
Yeah, because we want the movie to be fun and like a romp and a roller coaster of experience. It's a very experiential movie, so we don't want to spend a lot of time at any point getting too like caught up in like the emotion of the the ins and outs of character feelings. Like we get it, but we do need to cover the base. So that dinner scene with Mario's family was a tricky one.
Okay, so here's my impossible question for you, because the answer is both, and we can just be like, well, the answer is both. But the question is just like, maybe for you, or maybe in terms of the movie itself's goals, which one do you think is valued more highly by the audience and the filmmakers? And is it plot or character? You know what I mean? Is it which one's more important to serve? Neither, both?
Neither. We don't serve anything.
That's the secret third answer is none. Not none. We obviously take all of it into account as we're making it. But I think the main thing for us as we were making the film, and this is sort of like applies to Illumination in general as a studio, is it's really for the audience. It's like about the audience's experience, scene to scene, and as a movie overall. The whole point of every Illumination movie is just to have the audience have a great time in the theater. Like we're trying to blast joy into people's eyeballs for 90 minutes. We want them to have the best time as a family or a couple or a date or whatever you're doing at the theater. We want you to have the best possible time. You got a song in your head. You laughed. It was exciting. It looked great. You go home. You can't wait to talk about it and see it again. But it's really just having like a joyful, fun experience at the theater above all else, which is why we try not to get dragged down in like too many, sad moments or long, dark nights of the soul, any of that kind of stuff. We want it to be like very much a roller coaster that you are on a ride. So a lot of the conventions of like classic filmmaking and plans and payoffs and stuff, we don't always like follow those. And it feels very counterintuitive kind of coming from the traditional camps of like, oh, you've got to set this up and pay it off. No, you fucking don't. It's fine. It's exciting. Just do it. So we kind of like rewrite our own rules as we go, but it works. It's like you watch it, you're in it. It's very freeing, I think, once you sort of like let go of the fears. Like, oh well, we didn't set up this character trait. Like we're not gonna like it's fine.
Yeah.
No one's thinking.
I love that. I totally agree as well. Like I feel like that's a good way to sort of look at it in terms of, or at least it resonates with me. Something I've been thinking about. Another filmmaker friend was just kind of articulating that same thing of like, plot is overrated. Like making sense is overrated. It is kind of just like the moment to moment joy of it. Not with all things, but maybe like I could draw the line between Cormac McCarthy novels and the Mario movie in terms of just being on a moment to moment, line to line basis. Like there are themes that we can think about and ruminate over, and that's true for Cormac McCarthy novels as well. I don't care what anybody says. Right.
So somewhere out there,
no, I totally agree. I think
there's a 3.5 hour long Godfather cut of the Mario movie. It's like,
that's right. That's the secret one. We whittled it down. That's the one with Mario's dad's death. And it's funny because I think like I don't generally even watch that many animated movies on my free time. Like all my favorite things are like complicated, dark psychological thrillers and David Fincher movies and things, which are all nothing but plot and character. But it's funny because I think I grew up on like Jurassic Park and Fifth Element and Independence Day and just like these gigantic, stupid blockbusters that don't really care to make that much sense. Like they obviously hold together great, but it's sort of like, yeah, I just want to see the freaking Empire State Building blow up. Let's go.
Right.
I want to see the good guys fight the bad guys, and I want some explosions. So it's funny because I have so much respect for movies that can pull off like such a tight narrative and such a clear character arc and like make me laugh and cry and all that stuff. But at the same time, deep down in my soul, I just want to see like airplanes blow up or whatever. I can't fight it.
That's pretty impressive though. With like, I think in today's, it's it's Thursday and I'm bringing up the streaming wars. I'm saying with all of the
Hey.
way the companies are operating, that Illumination has kept that like guiding light of just making tight 90-minute funny movies. That it's not like they're not trying to achieve something, they are, but like their main goal is like entertainment. And I think that that's something that the other studios are still sort of like missing a bit. Like they're still trying to make cinema.
Right. And I'm like, sometimes I don't need cinema. Sometimes I just want to have a great time at the theater, and that's it.
I just think I just am also, I think I'm maybe anti-logic. I'm maybe anti-making sense in general. I'm bring back the Dadaists, like just bring back all of the silliness. Yeah, I mean, like because even those, like, you know, those Fincher thrillers and stuff, like they feel like they're kind of just a magic trick too. Like they don't hold up, you know. But then you put it under scrutiny and you have to make the choice of like, am I going to be bothered by plot holes or acknowledge that like that's part of the magic trick of it is like, yeah, the ball actually did not leave reality. It was just in the other hand the whole time. Oh no. Like that's instead it's yeah. And with the Mario movie, I think really appreciate you coming in and spending some time with us. But I think one of the things that hopefully the listeners come away from it is you know, that you're head of story. That doesn't mean the script, but it also is just like movies are huge. They're a huge production. You're in a important managerial role, but it's a huge amount of people. It's a team effort. It is not like one person's creative free will, just like shooting out of their arm like Mega Man, a reference you wouldn't know because you hate video games. But it's a giant kaiju monster mech. Yeah.
That's true. There's like no auteurs in animation. It's too annoying to make. It's too slow. It takes a village every time.
This is important. Did you ever meet Miyamoto? And if you did, what does he eat for dinner?
I saw him at a lunch, and I couldn't tell what he was eating, but he was having a great time.
Right. Was he? Oh yeah. Was he? No. Wow.
No. We were all in a no smoking.
Oh, okay.
building.
So you don't know. I could see that as. I could see Miyamoto being doing a Walt Disney where he's like, I don't want anyone to know I smoke, but it's like a carton a day. So
When did you decide Yoshi wouldn't be on it? Somebody said, "Where's Yoshi?" Illumination can't answer. I know that there's, you know, you've got your.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Like Yoshi was a dial. I think we dialed up and we dialed down, and for anyone who's seen the movie, we obviously dialed it very down. But I think in terms of true modern blockbuster storytelling, you got to give the audience something to look forward to. So that's the Easter egg at the end of the, literally an Easter egg, I guess, at the end of the movie, which is actually one of the last things I storyboarded on the movie was Yoshi's little sewer subway tease. So I don't know. I'm excited to see what can be done. But it was a great time drawing it in.
You birthed Yoshi yourself.
It was me.
that sounds painful. Was that at all inspired by a certain film that was released in 1998, also featuring a kaiju, but he didn't look quite right? But Godzilla 98.
Oh.
Because that movie does end with an egg about to break open, like, oh, there's one more baby, and this movie ends with a baby.
Oh, the freaking
yeah.
Same guy who did Independence Day, Roland Emmerich.
Yes.
Yes. That whole movie is underrated. It's a great time. It's a terrible, terrible film, and I love it so much.
Oh yeah.
So actually, you know what? Now that you said it, it was probably directly from my subconscious memory of that film. I saw that movie so many times as a kid.
Did you watch the animated series? I think it was on like Fox Kids.
Oh yeah, I think I saw an episode or two. You know what?
Yeah,
they tried.
They did. Well, a lot of
it's a corporate obligation. You have to make the cartoon.
Yes, a lot of movies did that forever.
Yeah. I was just talking about this the other day about Ghostbusters, right? Because as a kid, I knew that I was aware of the real Ghostbusters, which was the cartoon inspired by the movie, before I knew the movie. because the movie was kind of more for adults and not very kid friendly. So that was early on when I knew sometimes I like the concept and the IP more than I like the thing that it's from. This has been lovely and, hey, illuminating on the Mario Brothers movie, your role in it, exceptional. Really appreciate you coming and hanging out with us. And if I had to ask one last question to you, it would be, who is your favorite Sonic the Hedgehog character?
Oh, shit.
Can you name one?
That's right.
I thought there's only one. It's a game about one
That's right.
guy alone in the universe, Sonic the Hedgehog, the namesake, running through the void, screaming until he dies. I'm pretty sure I nailed it.
Yes. And thank you, Ashlyn, for also being here. And here's David to take us out.
Oh, right. I always do this. It always throws off the guests because they have no idea. Where I go, hey, you've been listening. You've been sitting in your car, driving by in the twilight hours of the day. Because, the sun went down, and you said I really needed to listen to a podcast that's about Sonic, but was actually about Mario, because that's what we do here. That's what you've been listening to, cranked up with your lovely partner person by your side. Oh yeah. But now that it's over, what are you going to do with yourself? Well, that's easy. You got to make sure that you're subscribed to Sonic Weekly on your pod, catcher, or caster, whatever word you like, of choice. And be sure to give us one of those sweet 5-star reviews, if they have that on the podcatcher of choice you're using. Otherwise, give us whatever the rating is. Give us a good review. Talk to us. Email us at sonicweeklypodcast@gmail.com. I think that's the email. That's the way you get into the Discord. You send an email and say, I want to talk to you about Mario. And we'll say, yeah, we've got Mario opinions. I want to know if Spike is your favorite character. I want to know. That was a deep cut. I didn't ask, if that was a Nintendo character or a character that Nintendo threw at you, but maybe that was after you joined, so you have no idea where he came from. That's okay. Yeah. He came from the ether, I think.
That's right. Where Sonic lives.
Right. He saw Sonic falling in the infinite void, which I think was part of a audio drama called Ogilvy, which I've never listened to fully because it freaks me out a little. But that's okay. It does have a scene where Sonic is just trapped in an infinite void, screaming at nothing. I'm gonna drink some water.